2 years ago, Robert and his partner Anthony started a product marketing agency called Fletch. And since then, they've helped position products for over 300 tech startups. When I met Robert last year for the first time, there's two things that really impressed me about him. The first thing was that it was so easy to buy from their agency because of how clear their positioning was. And the second thing was that as creative agency owners, they somehow had the grit and focus to not just chase every shiny object, but actually focus on the thing that they were best at. And so if you're looking to have a little bit more discipline in your marketing, in your strategy, Robert has tons of nuggets of wisdom that you'll be able to apply. But first, let's hear a little bit about how they started the agency. How many live sessions are you typically doing in a day?
We try and keep it to 2 a day. So usually there's one that's more strategy oriented and one that's more copy level that we have our copywriting lead run point on. But I wish we could hold it to 2. There's some days that ebb and flow, more so around the holidays to get stuff done, and also into the new year because Anthony's taken a little bit of paternity leave. Oh. So, but 2 is what we shoot for. Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, exciting news. The team over there is expanding via...
It is, yeah.
Birthing. That's awesome. I don't know Anthony. Yeah. I've never chatted with him, but but extend my congratulations over there.
I will.
That's awesome. How long did you guys work in the agency you were at before starting Fletch? Like, how long did you know each other before?
I was at the agency maybe 3 or 4 years, and Anthony came maybe a year and a half into that. So we had known each other for about 2 years before we officially spun Fletch out of the digital product studio. I was part of the product strategy group, basically getting dropped into companies as a fractional product leader. And Anthony joined originally as a business development person. So he was... And this is where we started working together. Our very first project is when I was on the bench, we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we sell more product strategy stuff? And we could sell a bunch of stuff from go-to-market plans to positioning to road mapping to actually building job to be done interviews, all this stuff. And that's where we started looking at all these startups and their homepages. We were basically building our own target account lists. And then began spotlighting problems like, man, we can't figure out what any of these companies do. And that's when we started posting on LinkedIn and getting a little bit of attention through that angle.
Was leaving the agency, as the two of you, was it known you were starting something?
Yeah, tricky transition. So yes and no. It was known we were starting it. We were very transparent with the founders of the agency, worked very closely with them. And
how many people were in that agency?
There's about 40 people in that agency.
Okay. So it's like decent size, but still smaller, still boutique. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as we were building this, it was funny. Part of the reason for us doing this is we were solving for a combination of awareness and like just getting calls with founders of startups. And the thesis being, if we got more calls with founders, we could land somewhere. And then ideally the goal was to upsell them these big strategic projects, design, development, strategy, all these pieces. And so that was the founder of this agency's intent. For us, as we started getting into it, Anthony and I were looking at the business a little differently of, no, we should just go do one thing and do it really well. It'll be repeatable. It'll be scalable. But there was the time being where both of those incentives kind of overlapped, but it became apparent very early on. And this is where we were very transparent when it was happening. It's like, hey, all the deals are coming through our LinkedIn. We're building the service. We're delivering the service. We started to have some of those awkward conversations, which were like, hey, we're thinking of taking this outside. Like, it's all open source. There's no IP. We shared everything we did. Like, you could take our whole plan and run it the same way, but we're going to go give this a try on our own. And that was, more so a difficult conversation because we were friends with those founders at the agency. But it just didn't make operational sense for we wanted to go do one thing, they wanted to do another, and we had to navigate that. And there wasn't really anything legal. It was more just kind of the emotional transition of pulling out of the company.
Do you feel like that doing one thing? I mean, there's a couple sides of that I want to talk about. One is the owner agency side, which is your experience of you're doing this one thing, but so many opportunities come up, right? And how often do you hear somebody who's very successful talking about focusing on one thing? You should be saying no to more opportunities than you say yes to, like that type of thing. So I want to talk about that as like an agency owner, but then also on the other side, what do you perceive in terms of like the client experience of somebody who wants to work with you on more things and you're having to kind of like put the brakes on that? You could take whichever one of those interests you the most.
Yeah, we'll do the first one. So the shiny object syndrome that every founder has is very real. Like we ourselves have almost fallen victim to that.
Sure.
But it just comes back to there was a book that I forced Anthony to read really early on called Built to Sell.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been loosely our construct for how we've been thinking about staying focused and building a service-based business that's repeatable. And so where we have 100% agreed is that, like you said, stay focused, do one thing. Now, the way we've combated that is through kind of an internal inside joke where like anytime one of us spotted that we were maybe chasing something a little adjacent, we would text or we'd just be talking and be like, oh, that's product number. And it started as 2 or product number 3. And then as the list grew, it was like, that's product number 34. That's product number 67. And it was just a friendly nudge reminder of like, hey, that might be cool, but like, let's stay focused. And without that balance, it's really easy because you're 100% correct. What we've done with our business is almost every founder has their wallet open and then it's like, can you do more? Can you do more? It's so tempting to take that money, but like it will break a couple things. Operationally, we are not experts in all those other things. And so while we could go do them at a decent level, not at a level that we feel really good about, it then starts to ruin our positioning where we slowly are going to just become a full service marketing agency for startups, which kills all of our differentiation. And it's just not repeatable at the end of the day. Like you can't run processes for all those things. And so on your first question, it's just sticking to it and just being really self-aware and observant. As for the customer experience, it's kind of counterintuitive. They love us for how specific we are. Like sometimes they're almost glad. They're like, okay, yeah, thanks for not taking my money. Because what it does is it then reestablishes how good we are at the first thing. And we're very transparent. Hey, if I did this for you, it means that my service around positioning is going to start sucking. And that's why you came to us. We'd rather nail that. And so they're not like mad because we're very clear up front. We only do this one thing. And even beyond that, it's a strategic thing. You have to go execute this thing. Like you have to really do all the hard work that happens after you fix your positioning. And that's what entrepreneurship is in general. And so, yeah, we haven't had any issues where people are like pissed off because it's always been set really early on. I think the question now, and this will bring us down a different rabbit hole, so like check me on this, is when is the right time to do that? When should we be building and operationalizing the next service? And how do we approach that? And those are conversations we've had, but to date, our whole thesis right now is we won't add another product until we fully operationalize the service that we have. And that does mean bringing in employees to run the service that we're doing now so that we have time and energy to go put into building and operationalizing the next service, whatever that may be.
Sure. And the clients that you work with, I mean, we've had conversations about working together. The clients that you work with understand that you do it that way. And then you're also trying to help position them to kind of do the same, right? To focus on clear message over being creative and crafty and whatnot. Have you ever brought on somebody who doesn't believe in that and was like, man, you can bring a horse to water, but maybe somebody you ended up converting.
Yeah.
And they changed their mind. You're like, how did that work? How did you change their mind? Because I feel like that's such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
People want to be complex and appear really intelligent.
Yeah. It's funny. We've done all 3 of those scenarios to some degree, but here's, for the most part, because of our model being so inbound driven, where we're sharing everything for free on LinkedIn up front, the vast majority of the founders and customers that we work with, by the time they show up in the sales call, consulting call, whatever you want to label it, they already have decided they're going to use us. They trust us. They've seen our framework. They understand it. And so they come in as believers. And that truly is 90, 95% of the people. Now, if we start layering on, outbound and ads and all that. No, we're going to get people showing up that are showing up skeptical of like, okay, I saw this thing, but like, why is it great? Not, hey, I saw your stuff over the past 9 months. I know it's great because I've seen it every single day.
Yeah.
And where that usually comes up, Dustin, is we have some partnerships with VCs and like PE groups, and a VC who loves our stuff will be like, oh, I've got a portfolio company I want you to work with. And so here's what happens. The VC sends a message to the founder and says, you got to go work with Fletch. And the founder's like, oh, great. So meeting gets scheduled and they get in the room and they literally will say this. They're like, well, my VC said I should work with you. And they will say, why should I let you reposition my company? And early-ish, we're like, this is an opportunity, an intro. We would try and sell them. And half the time we'd get it, half the time we wouldn't. But here's the thing. Even when we sold them in the call, they are hands down the shittiest projects, the shittiest customers we've ever had, because they're not all the way there. They're not believers. And so like when that happens, if there's no level of trust, especially being a service consultant arm, like if there's no level of trust there, you're going to hate our recommendations. And where that plays out is sometimes we'll get halfway through the project and it's like, hey, it feels like you're not vibing with our point of view on this. And we'll let them, we'll give them an out. We'll be like, hey, let's just prorate this, call it this, get your money back. Clearly you're not going to like what we have. And so now what we do when we know that's happening, we don't want to work with anyone who doesn't already trust us. And so when that same founder from a VC referral comes in and they ask the question, why should I let you reposition my company? Now my answer is, oh, I don't. Like if you don't think that we have something to offer to reposition, like we definitely shouldn't work together. And that's been a powerful thing overall. And so the short answer to this long-winded version is like convincing people and building that trust often takes time. And fast tracking it, we've just found to be a bad idea. And so whenever it's there, we're just like, hey, follow our content. We've got free resources. And when you're ready, you'll come to us, which is pretty different than a lot of companies that are out there like chasing, hitting revenue targets. Like we're not maximizing for revenue. We're maximizing for good projects altogether.
Yeah.
And the revenue just comes naturally, fortunately.
I think a lot of people who are, in charge of marketing inside of brands, right? They're in charge of whether it's demand generation or anything within those groups of brand or marketing, are salivating at the idea of inbound that is 90 to 95% trusting and bought in to what you're selling. And now it's just a matter of like scheduling, basically.
Yeah.
What were some of your initial thoughts and brainstorms and processes about your decision and approach to really build a business off the back of LinkedIn content and other things that maybe you tried? What did that initial conversation look like? What things have you said no to that were like shiny objects?
It's such an interesting question because in reflection, I don't think there was a big conversation. It was kind of this perfect storm of there's some folks, for context, I've always wanted to go out on my own. Like even the people who hired me at that studio knew like, I'm going to go build a business at some point. I just don't know what business yet. And so I've always been following folks that have done this, whether small agency owners, you got the solopreneur model, like the Justin Welches of the world, and I was following their model. And like, to me, the idea of building an audience and then monetizing off the audience was like just kind of the mental model of how I think most companies should do marketing, and treating their marketing as free consulting. There's a guy, and I'm going to blank on his name. Maybe I'll come back and give him a shout out if I remember, but he used to always say like, tell people what to do for free and then sell the how for fee. Like that was kind of his like model to think about it. And so that was always front of mind. And then you pair that with my co-founder, Anthony. He comes from a content background. And so he's always been building communities and like he's been around social. He's grown some different social channels pretty well. And so he has kind of that, he knows what it takes to do that. And so like me coming in and saying like, let's build an audience and then do a business, and him saying, oh, I know how to build audiences. It naturally happened. It wasn't like a decision for us of like, we should do this, we shouldn't do this. It just seemed like the best way to get attention. And I'll give you like the experiments that Anthony and I were running in the early days, they weren't all social. Like we did one that was effectively a highly targeted ABM campaign for a while, which we proved worked, but it was just a lot of effort. where we basically picked a subset of the market. I picked headless CMS, didn't know anything about it, built a list of all the companies in it, created a little market map, and then started sending it to every founder and executive I could find on the list. And I could get any meeting I wanted. And that was a great way to get clients. Like at 3 weeks in, I had 20, 30 conversations with all these folks. I had a really seasoned understanding of the dynamics of the headless CMS market and who's competing on what and how. I didn't even realize I was doing positioning stuff at the time. So that was one of those things where like when we started, we're just like, what do we do? And I come back to being focused. Like not only were we focused on building one product, but are you familiar with, I think it was Alt Agency. I know there's a bunch of people that have this model, but it's like the 5 1s. And it's like one product. Okay, I'm going to butcher these, so somebody's going to call me out and get me wrong. But it's one product, one channel, one tactic, one avatar for 1 year as a way to build $1 million business.
Yes. Okay.
And so we were just like,
Sure.
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so even though we had these different tactics, it was like, what's the one? Like, what's the one channel and what's the one thing we're going to do? It became very apparent that organic content on LinkedIn with images and in-depth analysis write-ups with examples is the one tactic on that one channel. And we just have been literally just been doing that for 2 years. And all of that has come off of it. And so that's why I'm so fascinated about your question, because I think a lot of teams overthink this. They think, I got to pick the perfect thing. And looking back, we probably did pick a version of the perfect thing. But if we started doing the outbound ABM thing, we still could have been successful. Sure. As long as we did it long enough where when we had all these like compounding effects. And so, yeah, it was one of those things that was just kind of a natural piece that, like you said, I think a lot of these marketing leaders would love to have it, but then they don't have the freedom to execute that inbound. I think it's a time thing. They don't have 2 years to go bet on this, where we're like, that is the bet. Like, we're just going to go bet on this for at least a year or two and see what happens.
For us in video content, the issue ends up being this. Video is never cheap to invest in. And sometimes people feel like it's their one shot to do it until 6 months from now or a year from now, depending on, I'm talking a lot about like maybe a startup or a Series A company. And so they feel like it's critical to pump everything into it. And you end up trying to chip away rocks with like a blunt object as opposed to a pickaxe. Like, it's just not doing what you want it to do. Yeah. I see the same with how you guys are doing positioning for folks. It's honing in to be crystal clear. But how do you help maybe a marketing director or somebody who's an in-house advocate for wanting to work your style, maybe speak to other stakeholders in their organization to say like, no, simplicity is actually going to be better and complexity is going to be the killer to our message here? Have you ever helped somebody navigate that journey?
So yes and no. There's 2 things here. Number one, if your executive group or founders don't have the mindset that marketing is an investment, that is a long-term investment that compounds, you should probably switch jobs to some degree, unless you think they're close to like having that influence. But in general, all the companies, and in that context of a marketer brings us in that's trying to change the way they think, that type of organizational like friction, it's just hard to change. Changing people's minds and perspectives on how they do things is just not going to happen. And when you were talking about what you bump into in your business as well, or like, oh, they're trying to like do it all really fast, really quick and make it all happen. It's that poor idea of like what the outcomes are actually going to be creates all the wrong structure. Like they think it's a do it and get quick results. That is not marketing. That is sales tactic, growth hack type stuff. And you'll get none of the compounding effects. And so that's my that's my aggressive answer of like, if you don't have someone that's at least partially believing, don't even try. It's an uphill battle. And I've tried.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, you can go put the fight, like there's things to do. The way that I would go about doing that are through examples. And so that's what we try and do as much as possible. And it's tricky because like you have to either have a network or know people that have been through that or like doing the research. And so for us, when we started, we were pulling our examples out of podcasts and detailed newsletter write-ups of like, hey, did you know when Airtable was 3 years old, their founder talked all about this, about how they were they spent 3 years in this terrible space where they were broad to everyone. And it wasn't until that they picked this specific area, and it was ended up being like this content calendar, like video production marketing area, that they started creating these sub communities. He's like, oh, I wish we would have done that earlier. That's how we were defending our thesis early on. Now we get to use actual customers as like reference points of like, hey, we worked with this client. Once they started doing this, this is what started to happen, and this is what let it compound. But examples go a long way because it gives founders and teams a chance to see themselves of like, oh, like that could be us. It's an imperfect argument though, because no startup is identical. And I think that's what makes it so hard. And like the last piece I'll say on all of this stuff is like, when you're talking about strategy, whether it's positioning or like what channel and tactics are we going to do, a lot of this comes back to intuition. Like if there was a cookie cutter like recipe to go do this the right way, everyone would build businesses and startups, and they would build them at a rate that doesn't fail at 97%. Like we forget that. We're in risky operations. Like building businesses is freaking hard. And so when these founders come in with the idea of like, how do I know this is going to work bulletproof? It's like, listen to yourself. You're doing something that by definition is the riskiest thing you can do. Like, and so your mindset of saying, how does this absolutely work? Wrong mindset. 100%. It should be, what should we be doing today to give us the best chance, knowing it's a long-term strategic bet and knowing we can't see around corners. And if founders aren't willing to lean into that as like, oh yeah, you actually don't know anything, this is all guesses, then they're going to be in trouble because they're just going to have the wrong expectations. Oh yeah, we did video for 3 months, nothing happened. That shit doesn't work. It's like, yeah, that's not okay. I kind of start to see why it didn't work. But anyway, that's my long-winded rant of, you just have to realize the context you're in. And honestly, it's more about sticking with it. It almost doesn't matter what you pick, because if you pick and stay consistent, you will eventually find what works. Like if you're putting in the work and staying close to your customer.
And I've said that a bunch of times about starting a business, is really the only way to fail is to stop. And that's like a huge generalization, right? There's a ton of outside forces and reasons you would have to stop, right? You have a family that you're like, well, there's no more food on the table. I need to go work for somebody. Like there's, so it's not to be non-empathetic, but, our video agency turns 14 in March. And the number of times that we went, it was, we got married. My wife and I got married in 2014, and she left her job to join our agency because she worked in marketing. And immediately after that, we went about like 8 weeks without a paycheck. And the company itself was 3-4 years old, right? You're like, 3-4 years in, you should be super consistent, right? Taking your paycheck. But yeah, I feel like it took us 8 years for me to probably get to the point of not missing something. And that's not because I walked it all out perfectly and that's the roadmap everyone goes on. But like, you got to have that like iron stomach and grit and kind of the like unrealistic optimism that you're like, payroll next week. Like, yeah, somehow. Right.
Yeah, for sure. And some of it does tie back. I don't know if you've experienced this, but the goal setting and this gets overlooked and it's really tricky, but the strategy you'll take is going to drastically change depending on the goal. So specifically, we work with a lot of founders who we get in front of and their mindset is, how do I build $100 million business? It's like, okay, woof, like that's a big goal. Strategy for that is like, wow, you're going to make some decisions today that are maybe extremely risky, that if your goal was create $1 million business that's more achievable, like you would just do different things. And like great. Tying this back to our work and positioning, we use this as a model of like, hey, you're doing $600K a year in ARR. What makes you think you can go position like you're a $30 million company? It's like, why don't we come up with a positioning to get you $1 million repeatable? And when we show them what that looks like, just kind of reverse engineering out of like, here's the markets you could play in. It's usually this very small, narrow thing, i.e. like the thing to focus on. And then it just becomes a question about ego. It's like, well, I don't know. I told my mom I was going to build a unicorn. Like, I don't know about $1 million business. It's like, and I think they have to make that choice. And I think it gets a lot of people stuck where it's like, why are they building the startup in the first place? And I think I see this weird sort of mental model for a lot of founders of like, to make money. And it's like, okay, great. What money, how much, and in what way? Because those are just, there's different roads to this thing. And what I'll tell you in our experience is Anthony and I's mental model was just like, what does $1 million business look like? And when you do even the napkin math on it, it's not that complex, and you don't need that many customers to get it to work. And when you do that, everything seems achievable. And then you can start making all those right decisions in terms of long-term bets. But it's messy, it's confusing, all that stuff happens. But setting the goal to kind of establish the ground of that to then even make those right decisions. But too often we run into companies that are, well, I need to grow and I need to do whatever. And then they get into that short-term mindset of like, pick every tactic. I'm going to do video this month. I'm going to do social next month. And then they wonder why they burn out and it doesn't work. It's like, it's kind of obvious to us.
And I think the interesting thing about Fletch is you guys have your pricing right on your homepage, like right there for everybody to know and see whatever they think of it, high or low. And I think also having a service-based agency, that's a scary thing a bit. What is your response to that been? Like, has anyone been surprised?
Yeah. Some people are. Well, this is what's interesting about just the fragmentation of market segments and audiences, because there's some audiences that think we're very high priced. And those are usually audiences that are looking at us as copywriters. And they're like, wait, I can hire a freelancer off, Upwork for $200. It's like, that's great. We think we're solving a different problem. And then there's other parts of our audience, specifically like the VCs and the more growth scale startups. They're like, you guys are dirt cheap, right? Like April Dunford charges $70K or so for a very similar process. And so you ask, like, how did we decide that? Pricing is one of those things that's more art. But what I will say, and this ties back to the goal of like, what is your whole thesis about how the business works? Our thesis when we started is that volume and number of reps doing the one thing leads to credibility and growth. And so in the beginning, and even now, 2 years in, we are not optimizing for revenue and profits, which seems counterintuitive. It's like, shouldn't all businesses be maximizing for profit? It's like, no. We're not trying to squeeze every dollar out of every opportunity. What our whole belief was, if we had positioned more startups than anybody on the planet, people will see us as credible. Our process will get really, really good. And there'll be all these other opportunities to monetize. We could raise prices. We could do courses. We could do these other things. It turns out that thesis has been pretty spot on. And so in the beginning, we started, I think we charged $2,500 for our first process when we didn't really have a process, and we way over delivered. We didn't make any money on it, obviously. But then we did 10 of those and suddenly we were worth $3,000. And then we did 20 and 30 and 40 and we raised to 4,000. And then we hit 100. We're like, we should probably make this 5,000. And honestly, I don't think we're anywhere near what we could raise this to. But that to us, we were just big believers of like, when someone's shopping, you shouldn't hide pricing overall, if you truly are serving one segment with one product. Now, that's the happy path. It all sounds good. If I'm being brutally honest, what we're seeing now in our customer base is we do have some folks that miss the old 4 or 5K pricing. Those are the bootstrappers, pure pre-seed that we've sort of priced ourselves out of. And then there's also companies we work with that the 10K we are undercharging, where we have to deal with some complexities of a Series C, sometimes publicly traded company that like has all these hoops. They've got dozens of products, all these different markets, and we realize, oh shoot, we're actually running kind of a different service, a different process for them that's more multifaceted. And so what you're going to see with us, Dustin, is an evolution on pricing. Now that we realize that even for our narrow thing, right, we only do this one thing for, you could say, early stage B2B SaaS startups is pretty specific. There are smaller segments. There are the pre-seed and bootstrappers. There are the Series B, and there are the publicly traded companies. We will start pricing differently for those folks just based on the complexity, but we'll keep that transparent. We think showing how much your thing costs is like, we just think it's a good practice overall, even if we're leaving money on the table.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you priced your model for volume based on the idea of a key differentiator you wanted to have down the road. What's the number you think you need to hit to have positioned the most companies to like claim the title?
I think we're pretty close. I think we're pretty close to there, to be honest.
Yeah.
April Dunford has thrown her number out there, like 100, 125 of sorts. And so I think we've hit that threshold, like just because most companies that do this, their desire is to sell you other stuff. And so like there might be some people out there that do positioning, but it's baked into a full scale thing and it's not the same thing over and over. So as far as like applying a framework, I bet we're already in, if not the most, we are in the top 10. And the bigger that number gets, just like more and more credibility. And the only thing I would challenge on your phrasing is like, we weren't even thinking of it as a differentiator. Now that if I'm being honest, it was just like, hey, this thing only is good if we do it with a bunch of people and stay really close to our market. And this is a real conversation we're having now as we're thinking about operationalizing. So bringing team members in to execute a big part of our process. Because Anthony and I still to this date work with every single company that comes through, like ourselves. We're doing all the work. And so when we make that shift, and the reason we've been dragging our feet is when we stay so close to the market, so close to these founders, all our decision making is easy. And that's why we have never outsourced content. We haven't outsourced delivery yet. But we know it's going to happen when we do that. We run the risk of falling out of fit. And so we're just super mindful of that, where too many companies want to automate everything. And it's like, well, when you do that, and I've seen this happen mostly through larger companies where they create these tranches of people where the ones who make the decisions are furthest away from the customer. We think that's the riskiest thing ever. And so that's slowed us down. And, but no, it was just like, is this thing, if we're actually going to make it work, we've just got to do the reps. Very much like if you want to get jacked, you got to go to the gym every day. Like, you just have to. Like, there's no shortcuts to this thing, and that's just where we started.
It was actually your guys, one of the models that you had shared, the idea of what are the competitive alternatives that I think, for me coming up in advertising, coming up from the hands-on production side and really like learning the marketing and strategy side that we could inject that made us unique versus a production company. As I wrote that line down of like, oh, competitive alternative would be just another production company. But the differentiation would be that they're able to create the content, but they're not a true partner in the strategy and the messaging and helping you write scripts from understanding who you are. And then the other side of the equation, filling in the canvas that you guys have, like, oh, well, you could also go to an ad agency, but to your point, they're going to upsell you, cross-sell you, put you on retainer, and then be like, you know what, we should just do a whole new website for you too while we're at it. And it is that like an immediate feeling of land and expand with the client because they're trying to eat into so much more of the business. And it landed us in this beautiful spot that people are understanding the terminology around more of as a video agency of we have the body and capabilities of a production company, but we have the head knowledge, strategy, and creative capabilities of an ad agency, except we're not going to try and sell you all those other things. We're going to stay very focused, and the content you get will fit within your marketing strategy because like you're experiencing or see, you're working in-house with, I don't know, I think in-house marketing teams are constantly getting like smarter and more capable and doing more with less, but really still need some of those, the outside frameworks that you've developed over the years that have like really honed in, and then they can take it and run with it after. Is that a lot of the same thing that you're kind of seeing with founders or heads of marketing when they come to like engage with you? What do they take and run after getting their positioning? What do you see a lot of?
So there's definitely some themes that are the same in terms of what you're sharing. One of the things we actually have to educate on is some of the folks who come to us have an expectation of like, hey, is this going to work? What do you do after you do the positioning? And so we actually have to tell them, hey, you have to go do that. But like, we give a little bit of guidance as well. But like where I think a lot of service businesses and agencies get stuck is, and you may be able to relate to this a little bit. And
Sure.
I would say it's a broken part of our model to some degree. And so there's probably some learnings for me on this side as well. But when you outsource someone to do the execution, so for us, we're basically doing a strategy refinement, and the only thing we're executing on is new homepage copy. And so like that is a thing, like we're done arguably, but then there's 100 other things you got to do, like build the campaigns, tune the product roadmap, run the campaigns, figure out where you're actually going to play all these things. If we were brought in to do that in the weeds, like all that messy work, it's hard to do as an outside consultant because the incentives are misaligned. And so even really good-hearted consultants, which all of them are, the model underneath it, the incentives, is that most of us are billing hourly. And so I remember being in these agencies and these studios where it's like, hey, they bought 35 hours of me a week, but we're at odds of execution. They want to do one thing, I want to do another. And the reality is like they're solving for their business. A lot of them had equity. They're signing up for the 5-year journey. It's like, yeah, I signed up for a 3-month retainer project at 35 hours. And so there's this disconnect of, can outside help actually execute the work if it's not a very defined scope? And every time I've seen that situation happen, you get just a bunch of bad behavior, not only by the consultants, but by these founders and heads of marketing that bring you on, because there's just mismatched expectations altogether. And so for us, again, the broken part of our business right now is we don't do anything recurring. We've built it to be transactional, which has kept the incentives very stable. Like our job isn't to, give you leads and customers. Our job is just to make you think sharper about your positioning and let it show up on the homepage. And we succeed every time, at least through our eyes. Like, and there's levels of like how well we did. But when you're measured on outputs and the abstract, did you get me customers? Like, it's near impossible. And then you get into the attribution challenges that I know a lot of people dive into. And so I don't know. I'm a skeptic when it comes to hiring outsourced folks for open-ended, like advisory style roles, because they don't have enough skin in the game. I don't think, even if as a person they want to be there and be close to the company, push comes to shove, they're going to protect their business at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think what I see with that too, we've done retainers in the past, and I've kind of had that same experience a little bit where we're cranking out deliverables, but there's so many other moving parts that affect the outcomes of content at times. And so to your point, attribution, we might be getting an unfair shake in terms of like, wow, these were doing really great. Well, yeah, you also had 3 events that happened that same month, and the exact attribution, might be misassigned. Or maybe we did do an amazing job and drove a ton of leads in the door. I think it's a tough model for us. Certainly, it's you guys have this homepage wireframe and copy. That's the final output. We have campaigns of video content that are the final and done. And I think it's kind of beautiful, because for you guys doing an amazing job with a founder who then starts something else, they're going to come back, or they're launching a new product within their suite. They're going to come back because you did a great job, not because you're on retainer.
Yes. And they do. And I think that's something, again, this goes into like, when do we build that product for them to, and again, if they come back and it's the same service, great, which does happen. But is there a product, and this is just a gap for me, I don't know, you might have insight here. Is there a product where we stay on as a product marketing consultant type deal, where whether they get office hours or regular audits where it's more subscription based? I think that can work. The other note on this too is like, where I think using outsourced people really makes sense, again, is when the scope is really specific. Where using outsourced people, I think, tends to break the most is when you're trying to go 0 to 1. And so I'd be curious, for a lot of the clients you have, like, have they done any video before? Because if not, then what they have to understand is like, hey, you're paying for the asset. This is a bet. But what works really well usually is like if they've sort of cracked video and then they're like, no, we know what works. We want to bring in someone like your company to be like, now we're putting gasoline on it. Like we kind of know what works. You don't have to go 0 to 1. I know it's going to work. Just make it even 10x better than the way we're executing it now.
Yeah.
That type of relationship can work because they've basically found fit for the activity inside of their go-to-market engine. What do you usually see with your customers? Are they net new where there's like they're just taking on the full risk, or are they bringing you in to operationalize a little bit?
It's a good question. And I had a conversation that was almost like you almost scripted it or pulled the script from it about, it must have been in August or September. I remember it really clearly because you basically said it word for word. They were a startup. They're heading towards a Series A, and they had been doing like UGC style video. They'd had like some very low level paid influencers that were doing some like iPhone stuff. And they were seeing it was creating the best traffic results for them and the best qualified traffic results. And so, we hopped on a call, and I don't always get to talk with a founder. Most of the folks that can afford us tend to be like, have somebody who's a head of brand or head of marketing, and that's kind of the departments we tend to talk with. But in this scenario, it was the CEO, and he was like, I got to be honest with you. He's like, we're going to spend some of the biggest money we've ever spent in marketing on this. And like, it's kind of my neck on the line with the board. And he's like, but I think we should bet on it. And our prices were higher than even he expected. But I think we proved that we could not only execute at like a premium quality, which is important. And as a side note, a lot of what we do is in healthcare, health tech, financial services, insurance, security, places where trust is paramount. And having not just a clear message, but premium look in your content. And that ranges from like the design of your website to the quality of your video to I think even just how your people show up on a Zoom call. Like if you're going to trust somebody with your health, with your money, with the security of your information, like you need to be seen as premium, unbreachable, like high quality. And so it's critical to invest in. And so he said, we're going to roll the dice on it. And they did some OTT buys, so streaming into, Hulu, Amazon, that kind of thing, and pushed this to their social. And immediately within the first 2 weeks, they're like, man, signals are huge on this. And
oh, wow.
They're like, man, Series A, we're going to be right back. And we're going to like double down on doing this. And so it was that, to me, that's the difference between the production company, honestly, even the ad agency and the video agency in the middle, is that like the fact that we were able to guide someone who hadn't done video before, or like you said, they like dipped their toes in it. They're like, we know this works. And we got to see their business like see massive traffic because of it. It's so rewarding beyond just creating a beautiful piece of art that doesn't actually drive business results.
When you say that too, it reminds me of a story of like in our business, we thought we could take what we were doing on LinkedIn and just recreate it on Twitter. We're like, oh, let's go build an audience over there too.
Oh, interesting.
Like they like good content. And so and this was wrongly so, we reached out to, we're basically looking for a Twitter social media manager to be like, hey, we have this huge pool of content. We want to just repurpose and schedule it into Twitter. And we had dabbled at like taking our posts and putting it into a tweet. And again, doesn't work, by the way. Like we started doing it and it's like crickets, because different mediums, like there's different approaches to how you even build audiences and get awareness and traction. The algorithms work differently.
Yeah.
And so we got like a couple hundred followers and we're like, yeah, like what if we just did it every day? I'm sure it's a time thing.
Sure.
We started getting into it and I started interviewing these social media managers, and like it became apparent because they were asking questions that I didn't have the answer to about like, well, what are you doing on Twitter? Are you doing this? And I realized, oh, this is a whole other thing. And so like our ignorance was, I can't outsource going 0 to 1 on Twitter. What I can do is if we did figure out Twitter and I had it rolling, I can then outsource the execution once I know it's already working. And so I see this a lot with founders, The most extreme version is they're just like, yeah, we've built a great product. Now I'm going to go turn on marketing. It's like, okay, like,
Right.
great. The ones who are a little less worse, where it's like, okay, yeah, we basically want to turn on LinkedIn organic. Like our outbound is working pretty good. We want to turn in organic content because they see, we have some success. They see the Adam Robinsons of the world. Like we just want to go do that. And it's like,
Sure.
okay, like, are you guys going to start writing? Like, no, we want to get a ghostwriter and all that. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but like maybe you could start that way, but I just get skeptical. It's like you have to go get the first 100 customers, the first 100 followers to even know what that looks and feels like.
Yeah.
Otherwise, outsourcing it, unrealistic expectations. Like you're basically, go make me famous on LinkedIn. It's like, that's not how that works. Like you just got to go put in the work.
It's the exact same fear that you already said too, where you're like, man, the moment we get another onion layer away from the customer, from from working the product or providing the service, you're like, we become that much more out of touch with, what they're looking for, what they're saying, how they're acting, how the market's changing. And I think some of the best just live feedback you get is how people are responding, and to get your hands dirty in it makes a big difference.
Yes. And it gets way overlooked.
Yeah.
Like LinkedIn is the most powerful tool for building a product, but no one thinks of it that way for the exact reason you just said. And what that looks like tactically for like your listeners or whoever, I always tell people this. It's like, I am constantly in conversation with hundreds of founders simultaneously every day. LinkedIn comments, like every comment is an interaction. Every DM I get is an interaction. All the meetings I take, all the projects we take. And that stuff compounds because I know exactly what they're struggling with because I've just spent thousands of hours spending time talking to them, and it's just irreplaceable, right? And it's funny because it is that boring advice, that boring startup advice. It's like, what do I do? Like the usual answer is like, go talk to customers, right? Like go spend time in front of them and figure it out. And I think AI is creating a lot of negative behavior because people think that you can automate all that stuff. Like, oh yeah, like I'll piecemeal it, I'll hire experts, all that. And like, yeah, that's fine if you have a business that already has fit, that's already running. That's not startups, almost by definition.
Yeah. Tell me, I want, just for people who aren't familiar, give me the Fletch elevator pitch or positioning statement. Give me that introduction, because we've talked a lot about positioning, we've talked about simplification, we've talked about website copy, but if you were to hone it in for somebody who doesn't know.
We help founders explain their product to their ideal customer. That's it. And it's funny because even that elevator pitch, that's basically what it says on our homepage. Like, we're going to fix your positioning so that people understand your value. Like, great. That's all we do. And it sounds so silly, but it is so simple. It's this one activity that these founders are doing. And then as far as educating and actually expressing that elevator pitch, we don't have to give that elevator pitch that often because of the model. It's like, they're going to figure it out reading our content and doing all that stuff. And so like, all we do in our content, so this is like a good mental breakdown for people who are thinking about their marketing as well, is your positioning and what you put on the homepage is just what I shared here.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to explain your product and then put it on the homepage. That's what we do. Great.
Yeah.
In all of our marketing, all we're doing is spotlighting that problem.
Yeah.
And we found 1,000 creative ways to spotlight that problem and give ideas about how you go and solve it, so that at some point when you're eventually like, oh my gosh, I have that problem, and that's an interesting thought, I wonder what these guys do about it. Like, you're going to come to our homepage, and my positioning, my elevator pitch is going to hit you in the face just with like, oh, they're going to take my 15-minute bumbling, convoluted explanation of my product, and they're going to turn it into something that can be understood in under 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
I love and maybe it's just the visual person that I am. I love the kind of canvas style, or what do you guys refer to? Do you kind of call them worksheets, or what do you?
The canvas, yeah. We have a positioning canvas, and then we have our more holistic positioning and messaging canvas. Before we move into our wireframe.
How many canvas kind of stages do you guys have that you work people through? Is it really one that gets worked on and just chewed over for the sprint with the client?
Yeah, great question. In most cases, there's the core positioning and messaging canvas, which has everything. Where we have we do multiple variations of positioning canvases. And so it's not uncommon. In our very first workshop, what we do is we show up with basically a market map of like, hey, it looks like these are all the places you could play. Some very broad markets, some very specific, some are in different industries, and again, this is very scattered. What we then do is we overlay our positioning canvas, which is a small little 7-box kind of exercise, over top of each of those, and then we look at it, and it's kind of like, I was trying to explain this where we're coming up with analogies, so maybe I'll test one out. If anyone's ever played like Command and Conquer or one of those map level games that you start and the map is dark, what we're effectively doing is we're saying, oh, you have 8 destinations on this map that you could go to that are all black. Can we turn them into like a little bit more visible so we see sort of the surroundings so that we can make a decision of where we're going to go travel on the map? Because we still don't know exactly what the whole map looks like in detail. And so each one of those little like, I don't know, civilizations gets its own little positioning option canvas. And we do that just so that it's very visible, like what decisions we're making. And it's really funny because some founders come to us and they have the expectation that we're going to come up with a wildly new positioning. And it's like, no. Like our job is to extract out all the ways you could position, and you've probably done a bunch of them or you've mixed them all together, but you've never seen them laid out. And what happens is when you don't see them all, you don't even realize subconsciously you're making decisions, or usually not making decisions, and you end up doing a little bit of everything. And so when they're all there, it becomes very tactile to be like, oh, we've been doing 7 things at once. And that in there is truly just the positioning problem. It's not that any of the 7 were bad. It's that executing all 7 together are bad and you can't do it. And so when you make it visual, it just makes it easier for people to have these conversations and then be able to make a decision. And so it's really funny. Like we've had some founders describe our process as like visual founder therapy, where like, oh, just having you in the room and being able to see it, like we're not coming up with anything new. We're just giving them a lens and clarity to take all these crazy thoughts that are in their head and make it easy to understand for them and their teams. And then once you pick, it's like freedom. They realize, oh my gosh, this is what, like marketing shouldn't be that hard, right? It's only hard because we never actually pick who we're for. And that makes everything else difficult.
Are those civilizations you're turning the light on? And I'm like, was Red Alert in the Command and Conquer series?
Yes.
I think, okay.
Yes, one of my favorites.
I'm there for it.
We just dated ourselves, but
right? 98 or something, 2000?
Yeah. Sweet spot.
Right?
Red Alert 2. I think that was my favorite.
That was the one. I'm going to pull it up again and just see how many pixels are really in it for.
Right.
Are those civilizations that you're turning the lights on, do they tend to be around like markets? Like I just shared, we do a lot of work in healthcare, health tech, finance, insurance, right? Or do they tend to be more around like a need? Here's a couple different needs that our product can meet. Are they more around like personas? Like, oh, you could talk to the marketing team, or you could talk to HR. What do you typically see, and what seems to work best?
Awesome question. We think our innovation in like discovering this with all these companies is looking at markets through what we call use cases.
Okay.
And so most people, like you said, will segment their market by firmographics. We're for tech companies and so industry doing 200 million with a sales team of 100 people. It's like, okay, great. Those can be helpful, especially to layer on. But what's missing in our view is whether or not that group is doing the activity that your product is actually a fit for. And so this activity view, and we've called it a couple different things, is some will call it jobs to be done. The risk is that there's a couple different flavors of jobs to be done. Tasks, but we use the word activity because it has to be something you can see someone doing. And actually, I'm going to share my screen because I've got a visual for this, if that's all right. Because this is like how we go about breaking down markets. When you take this activity view, the other thing that's important to know is that use cases come in different shapes and sizes. There are broad use cases and there are specific use cases. And so if we take this as an example and we look at like the broad use case of doing outbound sales, like that you could position as a way to do outbound sales, but it's so broad that when you think of like, well, how are people doing outbound sales? There are hundreds of different activities and methodologies and tools that they're actually applying. And so if you try and compete at this level, you're competing with a bunch of stuff. And so often we're trying to help folks get specific. And when we break down outbound sales, we then say, well, like, what are the supporting steps to doing outbound sales? These are like sub use cases: building account lists, building the campaigns, executing and tracking. And then even these can break down. And so in this example, the reason we show this is like the view we try and get for every company. It's closer to your phrasing of needs, but needs relative to what they are already doing. Because if they're not doing, like, let's say we wanted to position, because we view each one of these boxes as a market based on the activity. If your audience is not actually building an account list, then guess what? They're not in market, right? Like, so this segmentation already like eliminates them. And what's counterintuitive for so many companies when we're trying to get them to narrow is that they think, oh, if I go too narrow, the markets get too small. But sometimes when you go narrow, the market, the TAM actually gets bigger. So if we look at something like Clay, who might position as, hey, we're the best way to enrich profiles or enrich data in your CRM, which can be in support of building account lists, which is in support of doing outbound sales, you actually would enrich CRM for a bunch of other activities that aren't even outbound sales. And so there's these other markets that aren't even visualized here, to where, and you can see at the bottom, some of these companies are massive by taking a much more narrow positioning based on the activity. And so this is a deep dive. We could probably talk an hour about like what we've had to learn on this. But when you take this lens and you look at markets through this approach, it becomes very easy to then figure out and ask the question, who are you really competing with? And so Clay would be like, hey, and this is where you can layer on more segments, how are certain people and companies enriching their data profiles to build account lists? And for some of the audience, it might be, well, they're using a third-party API and pulling it in themselves. For another, maybe they're using an enrichment tool. For the other, maybe they're doing it manually or using a scraper. All of those are then now new submarkets that you can go position against. But we can only get to that if we had this clear lens. And so we're usually looking at the product, looking at the demo, and we're trying to build up like what really are the different activities that this could be a fit for, because they all represent opportunities that we can go message to.
So give me the 3 layers when it comes to, like, let's use Fletch as an example, right? So at the very top, you have maybe like a major like agency of record, ad agency type role, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And then you get down into more niche, a product marketing company or something, right? Am I kind of tracking? And then you get down into...
Well, here, I would do it this way. It'd be more like, what is like Fletch is a good fit for, like, if a company's trying to turn on and do marketing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do you slice up marketing? It's like, well, running outbound. Actually, I'm gonna do this a couple of ways. And this map would get massive. So we're gonna do the other one. It's like, well, I got to figure out my positioning. I gotta, hang on one second here. Figure out what channels to use.
Yeah.
I gotta develop campaigns.
Yeah.
Etc. And then it's like there's sub steps to this. It's right. Like it's like, oh, identifying target audience. Like all of these would start to break down. And so again, this is one view where like, yeah, if you're doing marketing at a startup, you might be a good fit for Fletch, but we just do positioning. And then to us, it's like we started to look at like, well, what are all the follow-on pieces of positioning, right? And this is where you could slice this a couple of different ways. In addition to like, here's how you execute positioning. It'd be like, oh, well, we're going to go, update our campaigns. We're going to rewrite our homepage.
Yep.
Like these are all the things you would do as part of like a positioning exercise or adjacent to it. And so for us, we're kind of like are doing 2 interesting things, and we've evolved. We just used to position here, like, hey, we're going to rewrite your homepage. We have actually decided to broaden of late to positioning. This was maybe 6 months ago we made this call.
Okay.
And now it's allowing us to, we're obviously moving into a bigger market, but again, our competitive alternative starts to change here. So even our value framing, rewriting the homepage, we used to position against founders doing this themselves and or maybe copywriters and being like, yeah, but they don't get any of the positioning strategy. Now that we're here, we still can position against like founders doing it themselves, but we also compete with marketing agencies and other one-off consultants like April Dunford. And so we've decided to compete in a different place to do that. And so, yeah, those contextual graphs get very, very nuanced over time. And again, it's just like figuring out like, what do you want to go fight for someone who's actually trying to carry out these tasks?
Yeah, which is it. incredibly valuable, hard to make decisions around or get everyone bought into. But let's send people where to get the information on how to at least see your thinking, because I know that all of these kind of canvases and maps are available on the Fletch website for like $50 for the year. They're worth at least 10,000. We've already discussed, maybe 70, right?
Right.
Is that where people should go and start? Obviously, follow you guys on LinkedIn if they haven't already started doing.
Definitely follow us on LinkedIn, and then reach out to us with your questions as you come up. Like we do everything manually right now. We haven't outsourced anything on LinkedIn, so it might take us a minute to get back to you, but it will be us actually talking to you.
Yeah.
As far as seeing a really holistic view of our process, there's a video on our site that goes through it.
Yeah.
And we also just did a write-up for Growth Unhinged. It's Kyle Poyer's newsletter. It's been our most comprehensive write-up to date, and we will eventually put it onto our own site and maybe distribute, but it'll take you through exactly step-by-step how to go about doing this, and teach you a little bit of the theory behind it as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I hopped in. I've been going through your maps. We've even taken, because we help with messaging within video content. We're saying, man, how do we take what we know best practice frameworks are in terms of messaging for web copy? How do we now rethink some of the elements of how we do it when it comes to messaging for video content in that natural flow, as people are doing good positioning and moving into adding a voice and adding visuals to it. And so that's been a really cool process. We've just been enjoying the work from you guys. So
love that.
Yeah, go check out Robert, go check out Anthony on LinkedIn if you're not following them. Most likely you're seeing this as micro content on LinkedIn anyway. But yeah, Fletch, give them a look. And I hope this has been helpful to somebody out there.
Thanks for having me, man. This was great.